I have a guest that I absolutely adore. She's amazing. She was one of the first female writers on Saturday Night Live. Oh my God. She is the creator of Square Pegs. And we are going to talk today about all of that and women in comedy. So please welcome my good friend, Ann Beats. Hi, Ann. How are you?
Hi, Grace. Hi. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. You look great. I know you're like, we were both putting on makeup.
I said I haven't had makeup on for like 2 months. This is the first time I put on makeup for 2 months.
Nice.
I left my house.
How do you feel about it? Does it feel good?
I think I almost forgot how to do it.
I know the feeling. Yeah.
Like, how does this work? I forgot.
Totally, I know. So we've been friends for like a long time. I took your class, I don't know, like 15 years ago, and then we became friends and we produced something together called Dr. Lupe La Picante. So yes, I had the honor to work with you, and you're amazing, just beyond words. I was so like, oh my God, I'm working with Ann Beats. And so I know a lot of people want to know about SNL, okay? Because of course that show's been, I mean, since like before I was born, probably. I don't even know. It's been there forever. So we want to know stories about it and how you got to be on SNL. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I actually started out in comedy before SNL. I started by becoming a contributing editor ultimately at the National Lampoon.
Okay.
And then that was something that led to SNL. And I always say that my joke is that I got into comedy the same way that Catherine the Great got into politics, on my back. because I was brought to New York by this guy, Michel Chacat, who knew these two guys from Harvard who were starting a magazine, and that magazine was the National Lampoon. And he would bring me to editorial dinners at the National Lampoon, and they would always have these dinners in like really cheap kind of bad restaurants. Michelle would bring me to the dinners, and then, I would come up with ideas. I wouldn't just sit there. I would like come up with ideas, and people would write things down on napkins, and then later they would say, well, whose idea was that? And then it would turn out that it was my idea. So then if they wanted to use it, they kind of had to let me do it.
So great.
Yeah. So that was how I kind of got my way onto the magazine and writing for the magazine. And so I wrote for the National Lampoon from its inception in 1970 until 1974. And I ultimately became a contributing editor, which was actually not a paying position, but I was in the masthead. And then I switched boyfriends in mid-magazine and ended up with Michael O'Donoghue, who was another writer. Anyway, so I ended up with Michael, and then Michael and I kind of left the magazine in a very dramatic way. And meantime, Michael had started doing the National Lampoon Radio Hour, and I was writing for the Radio Hour. So I was moving a little bit into another medium of writing for performers rather than just writing magazine pieces. And a lot of the people who ended up on Saturday night were on the National Lampoon Radio Hour. Yeah, because they, like, for instance, John Belushi came to New York to be in Lemmings, which was a show that Lampoon was doing, an off-Broadway show in the Village that he came from Second City in Chicago to be in that show. And so while he was in New York, he ended up being on the Radio Hour, and various other people, actually not, I don't think Bill Murray, but his brother, Brian Doyle Murray, and Chevy was on the Radio Hour, different people like that. Chevy was in Lemmings, and Chevy Chase was in Lemmings, and he was on the Radio Hour. So there was sort of a cadre of people who were like writer performers that I got to know through that. So then Michael and I left the Lampoon, and we kind of starved for about a year. And I started writing for various tits and ass publications like We Magazine, which was like Playboy's kid sister. It was like a magazine that they started up to compete with Hustler. And so I was writing for them because another Lampoon alumni was an editor at We, so he hired me and as a freelancer. And so that's how we kind of got by. And then this guy came to town from California, Lorne Michaels, and he came to dinner and he met me and Michael, and then he offered Michael a job on this television show that he was starting, and he offered me a job on his television show. Oh, cool. And I turned it down.
You did? The first time you turned it down?
I turned it down because my friend Deanne Stillman and I had sold a book. We had sold a book called Titters, the first collection of humor by women, right?
I have it right here.
We sold this book, exactly. And so we had to work on the book. So I felt like I couldn't be on this late night television show because, I had to do the book.
Wow.
So Lorne kind of just lied to me and said that it wouldn't be that much work and I could do both. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And another friend of mine, Penny Stallings, who was also working on the book, said, this is an offer you can't refuse. You have to do this. You have to take this job. So I ended up on Saturday night. And then I spent a year where I was doing the book and the show. And that was like, I was going without basically eating, sleeping, or sex for a year.
Oh, my God.
Because it was so much work.
Yeah.
That was the first year, and that was 1975 to 1976, the first year of SNL. And meanwhile, they had open auditions, if you can believe it, for Saturday night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so we were bringing in people that we knew from the radio hour. Michael and I were recommending people like Belushi and various people that we knew from the radio hour to audition. And I remember that Lorne did not want to hire Belushi because he said he was trouble.
Oh, really?
And we were like, what do you mean? He's like a pussycat. He's this really sweet, great, innocent guy from Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. He's not trouble. Little did we know. But so that was my start, how I got into television. Really from the Lampoon, from having worked on the Lampoon and from being, one of, at the top of a very short list of female comedy writers who lived in New York City.
That's amazing. And that's incredible. So tell me, what was it like a day working on SNL? Like, how was your week on SNL?
Well, oddly, I don't think the structure of the week has changed all that much over the years. But what it was that initially we would come in earlier, and then it started to get later and later on Mondays, and we would come in on Mondays, and there would be a writers' meeting, and you would pitch ideas at that point. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the host would be there. Usually the host would be there, but not always. And, that week's host. And so you would put forth ideas, and then, you didn't, it was the freedom of the show back in the day anyway, was really great because you didn't necessarily have to write what you pitched. If you had a better idea along the way, you could change and write that instead. You know what I mean? So you weren't necessarily committing yourself to this. Rosie Schuster, who I wrote with a lot, used to always just say, when she couldn't think of anything, she would say floor chili, which was an idea that she had, and it never got done. But that was like her placeholder for not having an idea. And I remember that once I didn't have any ideas, and I remember saying to Lorne, I'm sorry, I don't have any ideas, but I have noticed that if you fold the top of this grapefruit juice can a certain way, it looks like a little mouth. And he said, oh, well, in lieu of ideas, information is always acceptable. So that was very liberating because it was great to be able to just say, well, I don't have an idea. And then an idea would come. You know what I mean? Like, it's like if you open your mind, then an idea can come into it. Because if you're like struggling to think of an idea, you know, it's sort of like trying to start a car in the wintertime. You know, you're grinding the engine and you can't get anything. But if you just sort of say, okay, I don't have anything, then you'll, you know, luckily, you know, something will probably arrive in your mind. So that would be the Monday night. And then Tuesday, we would sort of trickle in and start working, and usually end up, I started spending the night there on Tuesday nights. Pretty much in the third year of the show, I was pretty much spending every Tuesday night there, and either in the second year or the third year. And I said, when they came to negotiate my contract, because I was sleeping on like a 2-seater green vinyl couch, and I would wake up with like green vinyl stains.
Oh my God.
Drooling on the couch. And I said, I want a bed. And they said, you know, what do you mean? I said, well, I want a hospital bed in my office. And they said, do you mean the kind that you crank? I said, no, I mean the kind with a push button thing that you put. So they rented a hospital bed for me. And I had a smallish office. It had a window, but I had a smallish office on the 17th floor, and it had a hospital bed instead of a desk. And then I had a wall phone, because, you know, it was before cell phones or anything. So I had like an extension phone on the wall next to it. And I had a tray table. And that was it. So then I could spend Tuesday night. I used to change the sheets every week. I'd bring in fresh sheets. And I would spend Tuesday night there. And then and Rosie had a couch in her office, and she would sleep on her couch. She had a big couch, and she would sleep on the couch. And so then I would leave a note for the receptionist who came in at 9:00 in the morning to wake me up. And I would get up, and then I would go and take a shower, because ultimately we got a shower put in. I would take a shower, I would get coffee, and I would wake Rosie up. And then we would usually start work again, because we would need to finish what we hadn't done the night before. And there was a read through on Wednesdays at 3:00. So, and also this was pre-computer, so we were typing things. So we would have these screeds that would be partially typed, partially written on yellow pads and taped together, and really like some sort of scroll. And we would pass it out under the door to the typists, and they would type it for us, retype it for us to put it into the script. But now, of course, it's all computerized, so that isn't the issue. And then there was a read through at 3:00, and which the host would be there for, and pretty much everybody, all the department heads, you know, like the set and costume people would all be there as well. And then based on how your work went over would sort of determine whether or not it would get into the show. So you were just praying for the laughs and the good reaction at read through. And of course the host would, you know, have their own ideas about what they did and didn't want to do based on what they heard. But, you know, some of the hosts would just basically go along with whatever, and other hosts, you know, would have their own thoughts. And then you'd hang around for a while after read through and hope that your sketch would be scheduled for Friday, because if it was scheduled for Friday, you could go home and get some sleep. But if it was scheduled for Thursday, you probably had to stay up again.
Oh, no.
Because you'd have to do a rewrite for the Thursday rehearsal, which started at 1:00. So if you wrote things with more complicated sets, they were more likely to be on Fridays, because they couldn't get the sets out of Brooklyn in time to have them there for Thursday. So you would have more of a break, you know, to have something on Friday. And Thursday you would go from 1 until 8 p.m. and stop. But Fridays we would go like until 1 a.m. sometimes.
Wow.
Like triple golden time.
Very intense. Who was your favorite host to work with?
Well, I think we liked the hosts who were pretty much, easygoing and willing to do whatever we asked them. Like Buck Henry obviously got asked back a lot of times, and Michael Palin from the Monty Python troupe was very amenable to asking to do, what. I remember he had this thing where he put cats in his pants, live cats, and then he had to go in the monologue, and then he had to go directly from that to a sketch in the confessional where he was playing a priest, and he wasn't visible, so you didn't, he just had his priest collar or whatever, but he was still wearing the cat pants, and the cats had pooped in his pants, so it was pretty bad for the person who was playing opposite him.
It's crazy.
Would be people like that would put up with that kind of literal shit. That would be the kind of host that you would say, oh yeah, well, that's great because you could relax. Whereas I think that the female hosts were usually the most difficult and the most demanding.
Really?
Well, I think because usually by the time they had gotten to be well known enough to host, they had been put through a lot of crap in Hollywood. And so they really had more of an attitude in terms of what they had to put up with, so they became more diva-ish. But then there were some female hosts were great. Like, I remember Maureen Stapleton was really wonderful and was willing to kind of do whatever you wanted her to do. And Sissy Spacek was a really easy host to have. Different people like that, but sometimes you would run into somebody. Cicely Tyson was very difficult.
There were 2 female writers when you were on SNL,
3
right?
Originally.
3.
There was me, Rosie Schuster, and Marilyn Suzanne Miller. And Rosie and I sort of gravitated toward each other and wrote a lot of stuff together. And Marilyn left after, I think, a year and a half. And then later on, there was a woman writer named Sarah Paley who came on board in like the 4th and 5th year, I think. And it was funny because when Sarah Palin was running for vice president, I was like, wait, what? Sarah Paley is running for vice president? I realized, no. Well, it wasn't as far-fetched because she did marry a politician who retired and became president of the New School. So she had married a senator, an ex-senator. So it wasn't so crazy to think that it was Sarah Paley, but it was still not Sarah Paley, obviously.
Yeah. So who was your favorite actor to write for?
Oh, I love all my children equally.
Oh, good answer.
No, well, I think that a lot of people wanted to write for Gilda because they felt that she was going to sell whatever you had, and she would. She would put herself wholeheartedly into whatever was going. So I think that she was like a popular choice. But we always felt Rosie and I had a sort of obligation to write for what they referred to as the girls, because we wanted to make sure that they had material in the show and that they weren't just referred to as, they weren't just relegated to roles where they would go, Mr. Smith will see you now or something.
Right.
And so we wrote a lot for them. He would say, have you got something for Garrett? And we'd be like, no, we can't write a piece for Garrett in this, no, leave us alone. There's no part for Garrett, because he was trying, very, generously, he was trying to make sure that people were covered.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, to some degree, I co-wrote, and Rosie and I co-wrote some things with Danny Aykroyd.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I just, Fred Willard was one of our hosts, and he just passed away.
Right.
And so they ran the Fred Willard show. So I took a peek at it just for old time's sake. And I saw one of the pieces that we had written in there, which I think Jim Downey contributed to also, which was this character that Danny used to do called Irwin Mainway,
Mm-hmm.
And originally he had unsafe Halloween costumes. That was something I came up with, which was he had a Halloween costume for kids that was called Invisible Pedestrian, and it was just a black bag that you put over your head.
It's hilarious.
And he was interviewed by Jane, who would be always horrified. You know, her character was named Joan Face, and she would be outraged at Mr. Mainway's, you know, terrible behavior. And he also he had unsafe Christmas toys like Bag O' Glass, which was just a big bag of chips of broken glass.
Oh my God.
And he would be like, "They love it, kids love it." and so the one that was on the Fred Willard show was, he was the head of the school lunch program, and he was serving the children ground up insects. And he was like, but they were hot. It was a hot lunch, hot insects. And then, and one of the things she goes, "We had the milk that you're serving analyzed, Mr. Mainway, and it's dog milk. And I don't want to know where you get the dogs or who milks them."
Milks the dogs. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
So that was kind of a fun character that we did.
Yeah, it sounds super fun. We have some questions from the comments. Stacy's asking, how many years did you write for SNL, and when the time came, why did you leave?
The first 5, and basically everyone left at that time because Lorne Michaels decided that we should take a hiatus. We were all pretty burnt out. And he wanted to let the show go dark and then start up again in January of that following year. And the network really did not want to go for that. And so they ended up hiring Jean Domanian to run the show in place of Lorne. And because she was an associate producer of the show, she was really the talent booker, but she had the associate producer credit. And so she took over the show, and almost everybody that had worked on the show under Lorne just left and didn't come back. And I also was, you know, it was time, I think, after 5 years. But I also had the prospect of getting to do my own sitcom because I was writing the pilot for Square Pegs at that time.
That's great. So tell us a little bit more about Square Pegs. How did the idea come to you?
Well, it actually was my agent because I came out to Hollywood occasionally. I had some feature deals that never materialized into anything. But for instance, I was one of the first people hired to do a modernization of the movie The Women. Did several drafts of that. But so I would come out here, and my agent Candace Lake had hooked up with a man named Frank Cooper, who was an older gentleman. He had been Frank Sinatra's first agent and possibly the first non-Italian person that Frank ever spoke to. And he was a delightful gentleman. He would always, oddly for an agent, he didn't like to do business on the phone. He would always come and see you personally.
Nice.
And he would I used to joke about him that, you know, he embodied the idea of like, think Yiddish, dress British. He was a very elegant older gentleman. And he took a shine to me for whatever reason. And he said, you know, I bet you were very popular in high school. And I said, oh, no, I was horrible in high school. I was a total nerd in high school. And he said, oh, well, maybe why don't you do something about that? Because he knew that CBS was in the market for a show that would appeal to young people. And so I came up with Square Pegs, and I went in to pitch it at CBS. And it was kind of funny because I had sort of based it on, like, some of the ideas I had from it were from being a big fan of the Dobie Gillis show, which was a show that had, strangely enough, Tuesday Weld, Warren Beatty were on the Dobie Gillis show when it was based on a book, but it was a book about a show about high schoolers. And Dobie Gillis was played by Dwayne Hickman. So Dwayne Hickman, having been a teen star, went on to become an executive at CBS. So when I walked in the room, there was Dwayne Hickman. And I was saying, oh, well, it's kind of like the Dobie Gillis show, which was really odd because Dobie himself was in the room. And so I pitched Square Pegs, and then I was supposed to pitch it at NBC the next day. And in the morning, I was staying at the chateau. They called me from CBS and said, my agent said, well, they were very, very interested in the show, but they want to know about, like, does it have to have sex and drugs in it? Because it's about teenagers, and it was the 70s, and it was actually the beginning of the 80s. I think it was like 1980. And, what about sex, drugs, and rock and roll? And I said, well, no, because the girls in the show are not, they aspire to have sex, but they don't. They're like, it's just a fantasy to them. And, I said, it's more, I compared it to a movie that I really liked called The World of Henry Orient, where this girl has a line in it. Peter Sellers is in the movie. And he's actually playing Oscar Levant. That was what the movie was about. This girl who had a tremendous crush on Oscar Levant. So she says, I want a mouth like a scarlet gash. She's like 13. And I said, it's like that, that's their attitude kind of. And so they bought the show. And so then they canceled the NBC meeting and I went back to bed. So they bought the pilot. So then I had the good fortune to write the pilot, have it go to script, have it get made as a pilot, and then have it go to series. But it was only on for a year.
But that's great. I mean, it's so hard here in Hollywood to pitch something and get it done. Super hard.
After that, even though it was canceled, I was sort of like, well, okay, so that was easy. I'll just do that.
Right. Yeah, totally. Well, we have a questions for people who are watching right now. Who was the inspiration for the character Mrs. Rizucha? And I'm probably killing the name because I'm Latina. So that's what they're asking me.
Well, I was Mrs. Rizucha.
Oh, you were.
I was, yes. But the name is actually my my brother-in-law's name, Rizucha. He was Czech, and he used to pronounce it Rizuka because he thought it was easier for Americans to pronounce. But it should actually be pronounced Rizucha.
Okay. So this leads me to another question. Where do you get your inspiration from for the characters? Is it from people that you meet, from people that you've known, from your past? Where do you?
Well, with that show, the two central characters were based on me and my best friend in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So I was Patty and she was Lauren. And they were exaggerated versions, obviously, but
of course.
But that was the basis of it. And then the other characters weren't really based on specific people. They were more like archetypes, because I feel that, it's sort of like, you meet, like there's 7 people that you meet in high school, and then you keep meeting the same people again and again for the rest of your life because they're such classic archetypes.
Yeah.
Like Muffy Peppermint.
Yeah.
Who was the hallway monitor and, the head of the student council and all that, But of course, it was a little bit of me in all of the characters.
Yeah.
All the characters were aspects of me.
I love it. Well, that's comedy. We draw from ourselves and how we react to other people we meet, right?
Right. Well, but they were, I remember when I was writing the pilot, I was out in the Hamptons and I would be like sitting on my lawn in the Hamptons with my little electric typewriter and a long cord to the house. And I would be typing and I almost felt like there were little voices that would be, that they were in my head. They would be saying things, I knew what they were going to say because they were like these little people in my head that would talk to each other. And I think that's, if you can get into that groove, that's when it really becomes more enjoyable to write, when the characters become that real to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. That when I write a dialogue or something, it's just kind of flows. Like I can see the people, I can hear them, and it's just really fast. I'm like, how did I write that so quickly? Because they're talking to me. It's like so weird.
I know. They do talk to you, and you just have to type it. You have to get it tight, copy it down. Yes. You have to quickly get it down.
Yeah.
I know.
Totally, I know.
That script particularly was like that for me. And because I have a lot of Muffy temperament in me in terms of being, a control freak. And I have a lot of Johnny Slash, who was the airhead, new wave character, because sometimes I'm just very kind of out of it and dreamy and, off in another world as well. And I think, so they were all sort of aspects. But, I'm teaching now at Chapman, and I teach a class in actually character analysis. And I say that's the most important thing about writing is who are the characters. Once you know who the characters are, once you have your characters and know them really well, then you kind of just have to copy down what they say.
Absolutely.
Down what they say and how they behave. And you don't, it's like taking dictation, you just start writing. Whatever they say, you're writing down, and you also know, if you know enough about them as people and they're real to you, then you know how they will react to any given situation that you put them in. So once then it's just behavior. Like, okay, so we know this person really well. If they're put into this situation, no matter what it might be, we know how they're going to react.
Absolutely.
So the most important is like, with real estate, they say location, location, location. Well, with writing, it's like character, character, character.
Absolutely. It's almost like you have an improv scene going in your head with the character.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's crazy. I know. It's and it's so good because the more you write, the more you get that, the more you get into that space where you know the characters and they talk to you and you're like putting them in a situation like an improv scene, and it's going to flow. And the more you do it, the more it flows.
Right. But, it was funny because having been on Saturday night for like 5 years, right? So it was sort of startling to me to be able to think that other people than Jane, Lorraine, Gilda, Dan, Bill, Garrett could play, that there could be other people who could play these characters, because we were so locked into, those people performing our things every week that it was hard to even get out of that headspace and think of other people acting the characters,
Oh, wow.
Like I remember one time we were, what did we do? We had, we had a sketch with Maureen Stapleton actually. And it was, and we had, I think it was Maureen Stapleton, and we had written a part for Bill Murray as Gary Cooper, and it turned out that he couldn't do Gary Cooper really, so he could do Jimmy Stewart, so we just changed the character and he made a Jimmy Stewart instead, because he could do a Jimmy Stewart impression and he couldn't really get Gary Cooper. So, it's like that kind of stuff, that we just adapted to the needs of those actors over the years.
That's amazing.
Like, whoa, there's other actors out there? Wow.
Right. Because you work with the same people. It's almost hard. Right. And you create
a company. Yeah.
And you create different characters. It's not like being in a sitcom where it's the same characters every week. So it's like
not like a sitcom. No, it wasn't like a sitcom. It was limited still, because it was just what was in their range, which was pretty broad. I mean, their range was very broad.
Yeah. So here we have some questions. Let's see. And please clear the air and why Square Pegs was canceled.
Oh, very easy. It didn't get high enough ratings.
Okay. Question answered.
It did not get high enough ratings. It was on opposite Monday Night Football, but there was a football strike. So yay. But it was still opposite Little House, the first half of Little House on the Prairie on Monday nights. So that was not easy. And then the network said, oh, we're going to save the show. We're going to move it to Wednesday night at 8:00. And then ABC counter-programmed and put the A-Team, moved it back an hour. So then we were opposite the A-Team, which was a huge hit. And they were supposed to be at 9, and they decided to move it. We got Wednesday night at 8, and they moved the A-Team. Or I think it was Wednesday night at 8:30. They moved us to Wednesday night at 8:30, and they moved the A-Team back an hour. So then we were in the middle of the A-Team. So we, I knew, I used to call the network to see what the rating was, the day afterwards. And I remember I was in New York by then, and I called up and they said, yeah, you had a 12 share, which meant that 12% of the people who are watching TV were watching the show, which now would be like fabulous. But, but I was like, okay, that's it. We're dead. And our lead-in was Zorro and Son, which was supposed to be this fantastic hit. It was going to be a fantastic hit show that would help us as a lead-in at 8:00. And then we were at 8:30 after Zorro and Son, and which I don't think anyone remembers. And that was it. Low ratings. And what was funny was that the poor girl with the ratings, girl that I called for the ratings, she told me that it was a 12, and then she asked for a job. And I wanted to go like, with timing like that, stay out of comedy.
Right. That's funny.
Just giving me a death sentence.
Right. Oh my God.
That was it. That was the reason.
Okay, great. Dave also has another question. He says he actually would like to hear more about Bill Murray and Don Novello's appearances on Square Pegs.
Well, they were kind enough to appear. We decided, I'd created this Marshall Blackman character who was a little fanboy. And one of the things that I tried to achieve with Square Pegs was that I wanted the people who were characters in the show to be media conscious, because at that time, TV sitcoms were sort of in this weird neverland where they didn't make topical references, really. They didn't refer to other media, Now, of course, they do all the time, but then they didn't really. And so he was a big fan of SNL, Marshall Blackman. So, of course, Don Novello was his hero. So then we did the Pac-Man episode where Don Novello tried to help him out of his Pac-Man addiction.
Oh.
He was addicted to Pac-Man and he needed counseling. So Father Guido could get him to stop being addicted to Pac-Man. And then the Bill Murray thing, which was so generous of Bill, but that was because at that time, they also didn't really have the idea of narrow casting, and they still had this sort of McLuhan-esque fantasy of everyone gathered around the TV set, like the fireplace, watching, FDR's fireside chats. It was like they wanted all members of the family to be watching the same show. And so we did not do well with the male, 18 to 35 demographic. We were not as good with that. So we said, okay, well, Bill Murray was the biggest movie star at that point from Ghostbusters. If we got Bill Murray, would that help? And they were like, yes. And Bill agreed to do it. But of course they didn't promote it.
Oh no.
They didn't really do anything ratings wise, because they were still promoting the show on Sunday mornings, Saturday mornings with the cartoons. But he was great, except that when the night before that he was supposed to be on the set, and I was having huge fights with his agent. Mike Ovitz was his agent at the time, and at CAA, and he wouldn't talk to me. Every time I called him, he would hang up on me, and I'd be like, well, Bill, doing the show, so we need to have a contract. And he would just hang up on me because he didn't want him to do it.
Wow.
And, we just paid him scale. And we gave him a silver flask, which is engraved, "Get out of here, you maniac," which was one of his catchphrases. And the night before, the phone rang at like 5 a.m. or something. And it's Bill saying he was in Mexico in a motel and he didn't know how he was going to get to Los Angeles. And then after my heart had stopped,
oh no,
he revealed that he was joking.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's what my friend just put. He knows about that. He's very well informed. So I would love to talk about women in comedy and get your opinion on how do you think the Me Too movement has changed women in comedy?
Well, I don't attribute it to the Me Too movement, really. I mean, I think it's sort of a simultaneous thing. I think that, and you must run into this yourself too, that things have improved, and that hey, I think it was only 2 years ago when Vanity Fair acknowledged that women could be funny.
Oh, wow. We've known that for a long time.
They kind of woke up to that. I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago. Did a cover story. I think that it's definitely improved and changed, but I would also say that it has not changed enough.
Mm-hmm.
And that, it's still an issue. There's still not enough women writers, performers, producers, etc. That you can still, if you can still count women who are in those roles without taking off your shoes and socks. You can still count them on both hands. So it's not enough. But definitely, I think it's better. Mm-hmm. And I think that, they're just, obviously there's tons of really funny and great women out there who are doing stuff, but just the fact that people can talk about, what about women in comedy, just indicates that it hasn't changed enough.
That's right. Right. Like when I used to do shows before, stand-up shows, there would be, now we have a female in the lineup. Like it was a big deal.
Yeah, I know. They'd have like one.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why I created Love at First Laff.
Yeah.
So that I would give women a voice, and give us stage time.
Yeah. So, well, that's what we need. I mean, we need love and we need laughs right now. God knows, more than ever.
I know.
I always say that Tina Fey was Lorne's Condoleezza Rice. Because he could point to her, and go like, "Hey, I'm not prejudiced."
That's hilarious. So how did you feel about being a woman on SNL as a comedy writer? Did you feel any discrimination or any weirdness?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. Yes, absolutely. John Belushi used to go to Lorne all the time and tell him to fire the women. And he wouldn't be in anything that we wrote.
Oh my God. I didn't know that. That's
how come Bill Murray ended up in the Nerd sketches as Todd with Todd and Lisa, because we wrote it. I wrote the character, Rosie and I wrote it. And we had done this character. There was this character that John had done on the Radio Hour, which was the 15-year-old perfect master. And it was like a American teenager who was sort of a guru. And like a Midwestern teenage nerdy kid, right? Mm-hmm. That he did. And I thought, this is great. We can use him. And then Bill can play the disc jockey. And they were going to be, because the Nerds were inspired by Elvis Costello, because I said, well, Elvis Costello is not punk rock, really. It's more like nerd rock. because he had the high water pants and, all he needed was a pocket protector to look nerdy. And so they had created Nerd Rock, right? And they were going to go on this radio program to promote their music. And so we wrote it for John and Gilda. And then Bill was going to play his like DJ character. And John wouldn't do it. So we had to switch it out to where Danny played the DJ and then Bill played the nerd character with Gilda, which turned out to be a brilliant piece of inspiration because of their relationship and the whole thing that went on. So that is the origin of Todd and Lisa, but it was really because Belushi wouldn't be in the sketch.
Wow.
So, and another piece that we wrote, which was this Hard Hats piece with Lily Tomlin, where it was a school for women hard hats to teach them how to catcall men.
That's great.
And there was a male like model that was supposed to, they were supposed to practice on. And John wouldn't do it. So Danny had to do it. We had to put Danny in it because John refused to do it.
Wow.
So that would happen a lot. And, and just other weird things. Like I remember when Rosie and I, Joan Crawford's daughter's memoir was being serialized in the Post, the wire hangers and all that. And we wanted to do Christina Crawford's Christmas with Gilda playing this Colleen character that she did where she just was like autistic. She would be like, we didn't really talk. And it was a character that she did, and we wanted to do Colleen as Christina Crawford. And none of the other male writers knew who Joan Crawford was.
Wow.
Except for Alan Zweibel, who said, oh, wasn't she in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane? And that was all that they knew of Joan Crawford.
Wow.
So they weren't gay.
There you go. Yeah.
They weren't gay.
Well, I have another question from Robert. He's asking, did Don Novella write most of his Father Guido Sarducci bits?
Yes, I think he wrote them himself mainly, and maybe had some assist from Tom Davis or whoever, but mainly he wrote them himself.
Okay, cool. Well, this was so much fun, and thank you so much for spending time here on Love at First Laugh. We had lots of comments and people watching, and this was amazing. Everything you said, fascinating and just incredible. Thank you. You're an amazing guest.
Well, thank you, sweetie, and hope to see you in person at some point.
I know. Definitely. Yes, we will. Okay. I'm sure.
And I enjoyed it a lot. So it was worth putting on makeup for.
That's a compliment. Thank you. I'm honored.
Well, thank you.
And you look beautiful.
Now I would go out, but there's a curfew.
No, I know. It's like longer and curfew.
Like, I put on makeup for this.
I know.
No, I can't go anywhere.
I hope you didn't shave your legs. I didn't shave mine, so we're good.
No, I
didn't. Oh my God. Okay. Well, great. Thank you so much. And thank you guys for tuning in, and thank you for all your questions. And hopefully we answered all of them, and I could catch all of them.